Hello, Ludwig and Edward. Got your brake booster finished and gonna test it and show you how it performs. But before that, I'll show you what need to be replaced inside the booster. Your vacuum connection hose right here was cracked and split right there. You can see the crack. There we go. You can see the crack there. Vacuum diaphragm was shot. The lips had collapsed on it. The air filter assembly. This is a new one. We're rebuilt, and they give you an idea what it looks like on the inside. And yours, it looks just like this. It's been rebuilt as well. And as you can see, you got a new rebuilt air filter assembly. The slave cylinder was in good condition. Vacuum check valve has been rebuilt, and believe it or not, your original brake light switch works. A little black septum that goes in here was broken when it came out of the box, but that can be glued back into place. Let's go over some the test here. This hose right here is at the access port for testing, and this is something that you can do when the booster is in the car. And what's going to happen when the booster is completely activated and under full utilization, this vacuum hose is going to register 0 on your vacuum gauge. Prior to that, before you press on the brakes, the vacuum gauge will read whatever vacuum the engine is producing. This, of course, test would be done in the car with the engine running and idle, and this is something you can test on all these old boosters. You can do that test yourself. And this hose right here goes right around here and goes up to this gauge, and that's the gauge that's going to read 0 when the booster is activated. And what you're going to see here are these two gauges. These are both vacuum, and both gauges are going to read vacuum as produced by my vacuum pump, and then as the booster is activated, this gauge will maintain vacuum reading, and this gauge will go to 0. And the closer it gets to 0, the more the booster is activated, and then when it hits 0, the booster is fully activated. On this side, we've got a hydraulic. This is the input. These two gauges are tied together. This gauge goes up, maxes out, and this gauge reads final input pressure as supplied by the master cylinder on the test machine. Output. Again, the two gauges are tied together. This gauge goes up and reads max pressure, max output pressure as whatever the gauge can read, and this is going to read final output pressure. And that's we got two different gauges because a lot of boosters have different outputs available to them. Your particular booster is the bad boy of the bunch, and it's a 4-to-1 booster ratio. So if we've got 350 input, we're going to have 1400 psi output. And of course, in a panic stop, you're going to really be putting out some heavy-duty brake pressures out of this booster. Now then, most people don't realize that when there's no vacuum to the booster is inert, and all it does is brake fluid goes in the bottom here and comes back out. The booster doesn't do anything. It just brake fluid goes in, comes out, nothing happens. And I'm going to show you that by the fact that the input pressure is going to be equal to the output pressure without vacuum. So we'll do that now. We got 350 in, 350 in. 350 in, 350 out, 350 out, and it's bleeding down because my master cylinder is actually, it's not even a master cylinder, it's just two little O-rings inside of a little poppet valve, and that's the master cylinder on this test unit. Anyway, so the booster is basically inert when there's no vacuum going to it. Now we're going to, before we go on, we will I'll show you how the brake light switch works, and we'll do that now because so you can hear the tone. Otherwise, when the machine's running, you can't hear the tone. Brake light switch works, believe it or not. Looks like it activates at about 200 150 psi. Nope, a little bit more before, about 150 psi. Anyway, so I want to let you know that the brake light switch actually works. So now we're going to turn the booster on, vacuum on, and activate the booster. Full activation of the booster. And we'll go over here. And we've got over 1200, 1400 psi output. Now watch this. Turn the vacuum off while we got pressure. Still have pressure. We're going to check for leaks, leak points around the base of the jam nut right here. The booster is actually, the slave cylinder is actually sealing down at this point, but if there's a leak, the brake fluid seeps out and comes out around here. Also, you've got a bleed hole. You can barely see it down here. Got a bleed hole. And if there's a leak from this bleed hole, that's your first indication that you've got problems internally in the booster, and that's why that bleed hole is there, and it's obviously not leaking at that point. So we'll release the pressure, and that is a good booster. And I will replace the J-bolts with the longer ones. These are just test J-bolts. I'll put the longer ones in there when we're done. No need to use this bleed screw. That's also one of the tests we were doing. I forgot to mention. We're checking to make sure the bleed screws hold pressure. No need to use this bleed screw. This is your main. This is the only bleed screw you need to bother with. Bleed this one first, and then go to your right rear, right front, left front, and bleed those wheel cylinders. And then bleed this one again at the last, and that would generally get you taken care of. You might need to take 1 or 2 laps around the vehicle, but otherwise, you've got a real good booster here, and thank you for sending it.